The massive chamber stretched out like a metal ocean under artificial stars. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their designated sections, each group looking as different from the others as night from day. Some had scales that caught the light like mirrors. Others floated in glass containers filled with strange gases. A few looked almost human except for the extra arms or the glowing eyes that never blinked. Jake Morrison stood at the center of it all, his plain black uniform making him look small against the grandeur around him. His weathered hands stayed calm at his sides, even though every alien eye in the chamber was fixed on him. Behind him, Admiral Lisa Barnes and Colonel Ryan Hayes stood like statues, their faces showing nothing but professional calm. The hegemony. Ambassador rose from her crystal throne. Zix Thyla was beautiful in the way that sharp things were beautiful. Her skin looked like living diamond, and her voice carried across the vast space without any need for amplification. When she spoke, the translation devices built into every seat turned her words into hundreds of different languages at once. "Human representative," she said, and the word human came out like she was naming something unpleasant. "Your species has been given the standard integration protocols. 30 rotations to submit to council authority. 30 rotations to accept resource quotas. 30 rotations to take your place in the established order that has kept peace in this galaxy for 12,000 years." Jake had heard this speech before, or versions of it. Every new species got the same treatment when they developed faster-than-light travel. Join the council, follow the rules, give up most of what made you who you were, and in return, you got protection and trade rights. Most species said yes immediately. A few tried to negotiate better terms. None had ever done what Jake was about to do, the human response. Zix Thyla demanded, her diamond fingers tapping against her throne's armrest, with sounds like breaking glass. Jake took one step forward. The chamber fell silent in a way that felt heavy, like the moment before thunder. His voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every corner of the enormous space. "We respectfully decline." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber exploded into chaos. The Vrex delegation began hissing in unison, a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. The ethereals, who existed as clouds of living gas, began swirling into angry red patterns. Delegates who looked like giant insects clicked their mandibles so fast it sounded like machine gun fire. Even the peaceful plant people of Sector 7 began rustling their leaves in what Jake had learned was their version of shouting. "Council." Prime Mordak raised all 4 of his ancient arms. He was old even by galactic standards, having led the council for over 3,000 years. His species had been among the first to achieve spaceflight, and they still thought that gave them the right to tell everyone else how to live. Silence. His voice boomed through hidden speakers. A chaos died down to angry muttering in dozens of languages. "Human, perhaps there was an error in translation. You refuse negotiation entirely? This is unprecedented in the entire history of the Galactic Council." Admiral Barnes stepped up beside Jake. She was shorter than him, but somehow seemed to take up more space. Her gray hair was pulled back in a style that had been regulation in Earth's military for over a century, and her blue eyes were as calm as deep water. "We didn't say we refused negotiation," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded star fleets. "We said we decline your terms." "There's a difference." The distinction seemed to confuse most of the aliens present. They whispered among themselves in languages that sounded like music, like grinding metal, like wind through caves. Jake could see them trying to understand how anyone could tell the Galactic Council. No. Council Prime Mordak leaned forward on his massive throne. "Explain this difference, human." Colonel Hayes stepped forward then. He was the youngest of the 3 humans, but his eyes held the kind of hardness that came from seeing too much war. When he spoke, it was with the precision of someone who chose every word carefully. "Negotiation implies equals meeting to find common ground," he said. "What you offered was surrender with better terms. Those are not the same thing." A new wave of angry sounds filled the chamber. Several delegates stood and began shouting in their native languages. Jake caught words he recognized from his diplomatic training: arrogance, primitive, destruction. The usual things that advanced civilizations called species who didn't immediately bow down. But Jake also noticed something else in the section. Reserved for the youngest council members, a few delegates were leaning forward with what looked like curiosity rather than anger. A representative from the Borderland Confederacy was actually taking notes. That was interesting. Zix Thala. Diamond's skin began to glow brighter, which Jake knew meant she was getting angry. "Your species numbers fewer than 50 billion across 12 worlds. The hegemony alone commands 300 billion souls across 80 systems. The Council represents 47 civilizations spanning 10,000 worlds. You are nothing compared to our combined might." Jake almost smiled at that. Almost. Instead, he reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small device no bigger than his thumb. It looked like ordinary Earth technology, the kind of thing that might hold music or family pictures. He held it up so everyone could see it. "This contains the complete genetic and cultural records of every human being in known space," he said. "Every poem we've written, every song we've sung, every story we've told our children. Our entire civilization fits in something I can hold in one hand." He closed his fist around the device. "And if you think that makes us weak, you've never seen what humans do when someone threatens to take everything away from them." The chamber fell silent again. This time the silence felt different, heavier, more dangerous. Colonel Hayes touched something on his wrist that looked like a simple watch. Jake knew it was actually a quantum communicator linked directly to Earth Command. The signal he just sent would activate protocols that had been in place since humanity first learned they weren't alone in the universe. "The Council has made its position clear," Jake said, his voice still calm, but somehow carrying more weight than before. "Humanity has made ours equally clear. We came here hoping to find equals interested in mutual cooperation. Instead, we found conquerors who dressed their demands in pretty words about peace and order." He turned to leave, but paused and looked back over his shoulder. "You want to know what makes humans different from every other species you've bullied into submission? We've been saying no to empires since before we learned to write, and we've gotten very good at it." The three humans walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet like drumbeats. As they reached the massive doors, Admiral Barnes stopped and turned back to face the assembled representatives. "Council, Prime Mordock," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "When your analysts review this meeting, tell them to pay special attention to one thing. We didn't come here to ask permission. We came here to be polite." The doors closed, behind them with a sound like distant thunder. In the silence that followed, 47 civilizations began to realize they had just encountered something they had never faced before, a species that simply refused to be conquered, even by overwhelming odds. Outside the chamber, Jake allowed himself a small smile as they walked toward their ship. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real work would begin. 3 weeks had passed since the humans walked out of the council chambers, and the galaxy had not been the same since. Emergency meetings were happening on every major world, in every trading hub, in every military command center across known space. The word had spread faster than light itself. Humanity had said no to the Galactic Council and meant it. War Commander Vexstar stood in the briefing room of the hegemony flagship Eternal Harmony, staring at holographic displays that showed him things he did not want to believe. His 4 eyes moved across tactical readouts while his aide, a nervous young officer named Klixa, updated him on the latest intelligence reports. "Sir, our long-range sensors show massive construction activity throughout human space." Klixa sighed, his voice shaky with either fear or excitement. Vextar could not tell which. Every human world, every space station, every mining operation has been converted to military production. Vextar's scaled hands clenched behind his back. He had fought in 17 different wars across his long career, had seen entire civilizations rise and fall, but he had never seen anything like this. "Show me the Sol system readings." The hologram shifted to display humanity's home system. What Vextar saw made his blood run cold. The space around Earth was filled with structures that had not been there a month ago. Massive orbital platforms, weapon emplacements, energy barriers that his best scientists could not identify or understand. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "No species can militarize this quickly without destroying their civilian economy." Klixa shuffled through data tablets with trembling hands. "Sir, our analysts believe the humans have been preparing for this scenario for decades. Maybe longer. Everything they built was designed to convert from peaceful to military use within days." On the other side of the galaxy, Council Intelligence Officer Kriesha was having the same conversation with her superiors. Her species communicated through color changes in their skin, and right now her natural blue was shifting rapidly through shades of purple and red that indicated extreme distress. "The humans have gone completely silent," she reported to the Intelligence Council. "No trade communications, no diplomatic channels, no scientific exchanges. For 3 weeks, not a single human ship has left their territorial space." Elder Zixwan, whose species had been gathering intelligence for the Council for over 2,000 years, found this silence more disturbing than any act of war. Silence is not typical behavior for species under pressure. Most increase communication when threatened, seeking allies or attempting to buy time. Kriesha's skin flickered to deep purple. "Elder, our deep space monitoring stations have detected something else. The humans are not just silent in their communications. They are silent in their movements. No freight haulers, no passenger ships, no exploratory vessels. It is as if 50 billion people have simply vanished from galactic civilization." What the Council Intelligence Services did not know was that humanity had not vanished at all. They had simply stopped pretending to be weak. Dr. Susan Clark sat in a reinforced bunker 3 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, surrounded by banks of quantum computers and communication arrays that connected her to every human world in known space. Her team of analysts worked around the clock, monitoring every council transmission, every military movement, every panicked conversation between alien governments. "General Kong," she said into her secure communicator, "the intercepts are getting more interesting by the day. The council members are starting to argue among themselves." General Peter Kong's voice came through crystal clear despite being transmitted from a battleship in orbit around Mars. "What kind of arguments, Doctor?" Susan pulled up a translation of the latest Hegemony Military Council meeting. "Some want to attack us immediately before we can prepare further. Others want to impose economic sanctions. But a growing number are asking questions they have never had to ask before." "Such as?" "Such as what happens if they attack us and we fight back. They have never faced a species that was prepared for war from the moment of first contact. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario since the day they discovered they were not alone in the universe. Every colony ship had been designed to function as a fortress. Every trade vessel carried weapons hidden in cargo bays. Every civilian had basic military training from childhood, not because humans loved war, but because they had learned long ago that the universe was not always a friendly place. Captain Amy Foster stood on the observation deck of the Council Intelligence ship Watcher's Eye, looking out at the stars and thinking about the species she had left behind 50 years ago. She had been one of the first humans to leave Earth and join galactic civilization, drawn by the promise of knowledge and exploration among the stars. Now she found herself in the strange position of explaining her own people to aliens who could not understand them. "They are not like other species," she told the gathered intelligence officers for what felt like the 100th time. "When you gave them that ultimatum, you did not threaten their government or their military. You threatened their children." Council Intelligence Director Morvex leaned forward with interest. His species was known for their analytical minds, but even he was struggling to understand human behavior. "Explain this distinction, Captain Foster." Amy looked out at the stars for a long moment before answering. "Other species separate civilian and military concerns. Humans do not. Every human colony is also a military base. Every trade ship is also a patrol vessel. Every scientist is also a soldier if needed. You threatened one human. You threatened them all." The aliens around the table exchanged looks that would have been meaningful if Amy could read their expressions. She had been living among them for decades, but moments like this reminded her how different humans were from the rest of galactic civilization. "The Council assumes that species will behave rationally when faced with overwhelming force," she continued. "But humans define rational differently. To them, the rational response to a threat against their families is not surrender. It is total commitment to resistance, regardless of odds." Meanwhile, in human space, that resistance was taking shape in ways the Council could not imagine. Admiral Tony Rodriguez walked through the construction bays of Luna Station, watching as civilian engineers worked alongside military personnel to convert mining ships into warships, cargo haulers into troop transports, research stations into command centers. "How long until we are ready?" asked Commander Beth Taylor, his second in command. "We are ready now," Rodriguez replied. "We have been ready since the day we learned there were empires in space that demanded submission instead of offering friendship." Taylor nodded and checked her tablet. "Intel reports Council fleets are beginning to mass in the outer systems. They are not attacking yet, but they are positioning for action." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Let them position. They are about to learn why humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever left Earth. We got very good at war because we had to, and now they want to find out just how good." Across human space, similar conversations were happening on every world, every station, every ship. 50 billion humans were preparing for a war they did not want, but would not back down from. They had seen what happened to species that submitted to the Council. Slow absorption, loss of identity, reduction to junior partners in their own civilization. The Galactic Council had expected humanity to follow the same pattern as every other species they had encountered. Submit, negotiate, and eventually accept their place as subjects in a vast empire that called itself peaceful while enforcing its will through overwhelming force. Instead, they had encountered something new, a species they had been preparing for. This moment since they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. A species that valued freedom more than safety, independence more than prosperity, and the right to say no more than the comfort of saying yes. The galaxy was about to learn that some species could not be conquered, only destroyed, and humanity was betting everything that the Council was not prepared to choose destruction. Fleet Commander Thexmol had conquered 17 star systems in his long military career, and he thought he knew what victory looked like. He stood on the bridge of his flagship Dominion's Edge, watching his fleet of 53 warships approach. The edge of human space, expecting to find a primitive species ready to surrender when faced with superior firepower. Instead, he found himself staring at something that made his 4 hearts skip beats in sequence. A wall of pure energy stretched across 3 astronomical units of space, crackling with power that made his ship's sensors scream warnings in languages he had never heard before. The barrier pulsed with colors that hurt to look at directly, and every time one of his scout ships tried to approach, warning pulses shot out that made his best scientists back away from their instruments in fear. "Report," he commanded his tactical officer, trying to keep the uncertainty out of his voice. Lieutenant Vaxta worked frantically at her control station, her 6 arms moving across displays that showed readings she did not understand. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy output from the barrier. Our scientists believe it is some form of weaponized space-time distortion. Our probes cannot penetrate it, and any approach closer than 10,000 kilometers triggers response. Patterns that our computers cannot analyze." Behind the barrier, Admiral Tony Rodriguez stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest battleship and the pride of Earth's rapidly expanded fleet. The ship had been built in secret over the past 20 years, disguised as a deep space research station until the moment humanity decided to reveal its true nature. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every Council ship within. 50 light years of human space. His officers worked with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. 53 ships in their main battle group, reported Commander Beth Taylor, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Another 112 in supporting positions spread across the outer system perimeter. They brought enough firepower to destroy a planet. Rodriguez studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had spent 40 years learning how to fight impossible odds. Good. Let them see what happens when someone threatens Earth. The communication came through on all frequencies simultaneously, broadcast with the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Fleet Commander Thexmol's voice echoed through human space as translation programs turned his words into Earth's languages. "Humans of Sol System, you are in violation of Galactic Council Resolution 4847 regarding mandatory integration protocols. Lower your defensive barriers immediately and prepare for occupying forces. You have 1 standard hour to comply with these lawful orders." The response came not in words, but in actions that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. The energy barrier began to dissolve in sections, revealing not a cowering civilization huddled behind their defenses, but the largest concentration of military power that human engineering had ever produced. 3,000 ships of war hung in perfect formation across human space. Battleships that dwarfed anything in the Council fleets stretched across the star field like metal. Mountains. Carriers launched endless streams of fighters whose designs had never been seen before, each one moving with precision that spoke of pilots who had trained for combat since childhood. At the center of the formation, something floated in space. That made even veteran Council warriors step back from their viewing screens in shock. Earth itself had been transformed into a mobile fortress, its entire surface covered with weapons platforms that tracked every Council ship simultaneously. Commander Taylor opened a communication channel to the Council fleet, her voice carrying across space with the calm authority of someone delivering an ultimatum. "Fleet Commander Thexmol, this is Admiral Rodriguez of the United Earth Systems Navy. You said you wanted to negotiate. Here are our terms. Leave our space now, or learn why humans prefer not to be threatened." A silence that followed lasted exactly 60 seconds. 60 seconds during which Council tactical officers tried to count human ships and gave up when their computers could not process the numbers fast enough. 60 seconds during which Fleet Commander Thexmol realized that everything the Council knew about human military capability had been completely wrong. Lieutenant Vaxta's voice shook as she read from her displays. "Sir, we are detecting weapon signatures we have never seen before. Energy readings that exceed our understanding of physics. They have ships that are registering as larger than our entire battle group combined. But it was not the size of the human fleet that made Vexmal's blood run cold. It was the formation they had chosen. Every human ship was positioned to defend, not just human space, but each other. They had arranged themselves not for conquest or intimidation, but for a fight to the death. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the U.S. Terra, the converted planet ship that served as humanity's ultimate fortress. Around him, displays showed the faces of ship captains from across human space, each one ready to die rather than surrender their freedom. All ships, this is Terra Command, he broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. Remember why we are here. Not to conquer, not to expand, but to defend the right of our children to grow up free. The responses came back in voices that carried the accents of dozens of human worlds. Terra Command, this is New Boston Station, ready to engage. Terra Command, this is the U.S. Liberty, weapons hot and ready. Terra Command, this is Mars. Defense Command, all batteries armed and tracking targets. Fleet Commander Vexmal watched his tactical displays update with growing horror as more human ships appeared from behind asteroids, from the shadows of planets, from hidden bases that had been invisible until this moment. His fleet of 53 ships was suddenly outnumbered by more than 50 to 1. Sir, Lieutenant Vaxda whispered, recommend immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance. But Vexmal was a professional soldier, and he recognized something in the human formation that his politicians had not understood. These were not the positions of a species preparing to attack. They were the positions of a species that had been attacked too many times in their history and had decided never to be victims again. Admiral Rodriguez opened one final communication channel, broadcasting not just to the Council fleet, but to monitoring stations across the galaxy. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of 50 billion humans who had chosen to stand together rather than kneel separately. To all Council forces in human space, you came here expecting to find subjects. Instead, you found citizens. You came expecting compliance. Instead, you found courage. You have 1 hour to withdraw to your own territory. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war. The holographic displays showed Council ships beginning to power down their weapons and turn away from human space. But Rodriguez knew this was not victory. This was only the beginning. The Council would return with larger fleets, with different strategies, with the combined might of 47 civilizations determined to prove that no species could say no to their authority. Let them come, he thought as he watched the tactical displays. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning how to fight against impossible odds. They had defeated empires before, had stood against tyrants who thought numbers alone could crush the human spirit. The galaxy was about to learn that some things could not be conquered, only earned, and humanity's respect had never been for sale. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in recorded history. Representatives from every known civilization filled the great chamber, their voices creating a symphony of worry that echoed off the ancient walls. The news of Fleet Commander Vexmal's retreat had spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, and now every species was asking the same question. What did the humans know that the rest of the galaxy did not? Ambassador Velthari of the architect species rose slowly from her crystalline seat. At over 6,000 years old, she was among the eldest beings in the galaxy, having witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of millennia. Fellow Council members, she began, her ancient words translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. We face something that has never occurred in the 12,000-year history of this body. Not a species that challenges our authority through superior technology or greater numbers, but one that simply refuses to acknowledge our right to rule them. In the intelligence analysis centers deep beneath the Council chambers, The truth was slowly becoming clear to strategists who had spent their entire careers studying warfare between civilizations. The data streaming in from human space painted a picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about how societies developed. Captain Amy Foster stood before a gathering of the galaxy's top intelligence officers, her human features strange among the scaled, feathered, and crystalline faces around the table. She had left Earth 50 years ago as a young explorer seeking adventure among the stars. But now she found herself in the unique position of explaining her own species to aliens who could not understand them. "You still do not get it," she said, her voice carrying frustration that had been building for weeks. "Humans do not separate military and civilian infrastructure the way other species do. When you threatened them, you did not threaten their government or their army. You threatened their children." Chief Intelligence Coordinator Zarthex leaned forward with 4 of his 6 eyes focused intently on the human. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their analytical abilities, but even their advanced minds were struggling with the concept Amy was trying to explain. "These production figures cannot be accurate," he insisted, gesturing at holographic displays that showed impossible numbers. "No civilization can maintain this level of military output without completely destroying their civilian economy. The mathematics simply do not work." Amy almost smiled at that. Almost. "That is where you are wrong. Human civilian economy is there. Military economy. Every factory that makes farming equipment can make weapons. Every shipyard that builds cargo haulers can build warships. Every colony that grows food can support an army. We have been doing this since before we learned to write." She brought up a display showing human colony layouts that made the alien. Intelligence officers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Look at these settlement patterns. Every human town is built like a fortress. Every civilian knows how to fight. Every parent teaches their children how to defend their homes. You think this is because humans love war, but you are wrong. It is because we have learned that the universe is not always a safe place." Meanwhile, across human space, the real scope of their preparation was becoming visible for the first time. General Scott Williams coordinated defensive positions from the command center on New Washington, one of humanity's newest colonies that had been disguised as a peaceful farming world. "Council probe ships are testing our outer perimeter defenses," reported Colonel Janet Price from her position on the frontier world of New Montana. "They are not attacking, but they are definitely trying to figure out what we can do." General Williams studied the tactical displays that showed human defensive positions across 47 worlds. Each planet looked peaceful from space, with cities and farms and normal civilian activity. But hidden beneath that peaceful surface was a military infrastructure that had been 50 years in the making. "Let them probe," he replied. "They will learn that every human world is prepared to fight alone if necessary. And that is something the Council has never encountered before." The truth was that humanity had learned bitter lessons from their own history. They had seen what happened when peaceful civilizations faced aggressive empires. They had watched as democracy fell to dictatorship, as freedom was traded for security, as entire cultures disappeared because they could not defend themselves. When the time came, so when humans reached the stars and discovered they were not alone, they made a choice. They would be friendly. They would trade. They would share knowledge and culture with any species that approached them in peace. But they would never again be vulnerable to those who preferred conquest to cooperation. Dr. Sandra Mitchell sat in the research facility beneath the Antarctic ice, analyzing intercepted Council communications with a team of xenolinguists who had spent decades learning to understand alien thought patterns. What they were discovering was changing everything humans thought they knew about galactic civilization. "The Council member species are starting to split into factions," she reported to Earth Command through encrypted channels. "Some still want to use military force against us. Others are pushing for economic sanctions. But there is a third group that is asking questions they have never had to ask before. What kind of questions? Asked General Kong from his position aboard the orbital. Command Station Sandra pulled up translations of the latest council debates, her face grim as she read the alien words. They are asking why we refuse. Not how to make us submit, but why we choose resistance over compliance. Some of them are starting to examine their own system and wondering if maybe we have good reasons for saying no. The implications of this were staggering. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council had operated on the assumption that their system was the best possible way to organize galactic civilization. They had never encountered a species that looked at their offer of membership and decided it was not worth the price they demanded. Back in the council chambers, the debate was growing more heated by the hour. War Commander Vexstar stood at the military briefing podium, his scaled hands gesturing at displays that showed human military capabilities. Honored council members, our analysis indicates that the humans have been preparing for large-scale conflict. Since their first contact with galactic civilization, every ship they built, every colony they established, every trade agreement they signed was designed with warfare in mind. Murmurs of alarm swept through the assembled representatives. The idea that a species would spend 50 years preparing to fight the entire galaxy seemed impossible to civilizations that had known only peace under council rule. But this makes no sense, protested Trade Minister Kexler of the Merchant Federation. Why would they prepare for war when they could have peace through simple compliance with established protocols? It was Ambassador Velthari who provided the answer that would change everything. She rose again from her ancient seat, her crystalline features reflecting the light of artificial stars, as she spoke words that would echo through galactic history. Perhaps, she said slowly, we have been asking the wrong question. Instead of wondering how to force human compliance, we should ask why they refuse, and whether their refusal reveals flaws in our own system that we have been too proud to see. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council was being forced to examine not just how to maintain their power, but whether that power was just. 6 months had passed since the standoff at Sol System, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The human refusal to submit had sent ripples across space that grew stronger with each passing day. Species that had accepted council authority for thousands of years were beginning to ask questions they had never dared voice before. On the neutral trading station Deep Harbor, far from council space and human territory alike, Ambassador Kate Murphy sat at a simple metal table surrounded by representatives from 12 different non-council species. The meeting had been arranged in secret, but word was spreading that someone was finally willing to listen to grievances that had been building for centuries. Trade Minister Yekska of the Borderland Confederacy spoke first, his voice carrying the frustration of generations. The hegemony takes 60% of our agricultural output every year. The Council says it is for galactic stability and the greater good, but our people struggle to feed their children while our crops feed alien worlds. Ambassador Murphy nodded as she listened to similar stories from around the table. Mining rights seized in the name of galactic development. Young people conscripted for council projects and never returned. Entire cultures slowly disappearing. As council integration policies replaced local traditions with standardized galactic norms. The council's mistake, she said when the stories were finished, is thinking that survival requires submission. Humans learned long ago that cooperation between equals is stronger than domination by superiors. What the council had not anticipated was how quickly their authority would begin to erode once someone showed it was possible to say no. Independent worlds that had been neutral began forming their own defense agreements. Trade routes that had operated under Council oversight for millennia, started excluding Council ships. Even some Council member species were quietly questioning whether the benefits of membership were worth the loss of independence. In the Great Council chambers, emergency sessions had become routine. Fleet Admiral Kexter stood before the assembled representatives, delivering reports that grew more troubling each week. 17 star systems have formally withdrawn from Council trade agreements, he announced to the shocked assembly. 43 more have declared complete neutrality in any conflict involving human space. The humans have not fired a single shot in anger, yet our influence diminishes daily. Council Prime Mordok sat on his ancient throne, feeling the weight of his 3,000 years of leadership like never before. He had guided the Council through wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations, but he had never faced anything like this. The humans were not trying to conquer the galaxy or overthrow the Council. They were simply living their lives and letting others see that there was another way to exist among the stars. Perhaps, he said finally, his voice echoing through the chamber, we have been asking the wrong questions. Instead of wondering how to force human compliance, we should ask what we can learn from their refusal. The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Some Council members still demanded military action, insisting that allowing human independence would destroy galactic order. Others pushed for economic warfare, believing that isolation would eventually force humanity to submit. But a growing faction, led by Ambassador Valfari and the Architect delegation, began examining human society with genuine curiosity rather than condescension. Their findings challenged everything the Council thought they knew about how civilizations should develop. Humans had somehow managed to combine individual freedom with collective responsibility, creating societies that were both diverse and unified. They prepared constantly for war, but spent most of their energy on peaceful pursuits. They refused to negotiate from weakness, but never stopped offering cooperation to those who approached them as equals. Human civilization operates on principles we abandoned millennia, Ambassador Valfari reported to a stunned Council session. They value personal choice while maintaining social unity. They prepare for conflict to preserve peace. They refuse to surrender their independence, but they have never stopped extending friendship to anyone willing to treat them as equals rather than subjects. Meanwhile, the real change was happening not in Council chambers or military briefings, but in quiet conversations on trading stations, mining colonies, and frontier worlds where ordinary beings were beginning to imagine different ways of organizing their lives. Captain Dan Foster commanded a human merchant vessel that had been making careful contact with non-Council species interested in trade agreements that did not require political submission. His ship carried not just Earth goods, but something more valuable, proof that it was possible to prosper without surrendering your freedom to a larger authority. The Council system worked when everyone believed it was the only way, he explained, to a gathering of independent traders. But once people see there are alternatives, they start asking why they accepted the old way in the first place. The final confrontation came not through military action or economic pressure, but in a simple meeting room on the border station Crossroads. Admiral Lisa Barnes sat across from Council Prime Mordok himself, with no weapons, no fleets, no threats. A force, just two leaders finally talking honestly about what their peoples wanted from the galaxy. What do humans truly want? Mordok asked, his ancient voice carrying genuine curiosity for the first time in centuries. Admiral Barnes smiled, and for a moment she looked more like a teacher than a military commander. What we have always wanted: to be left alone to live our lives, raise our children, and explore the universe in our own way. We do not want to rule the galaxy, Council Prime. We just refuse to be ruled by it. The conversation that followed established what historians would later call the Crossroads Accords. Humanity would remain independent, but open to cooperation with any species that approached them with respect rather than demands. The Council would acknowledge human sovereignty while benefiting from human innovation and perspective. More importantly, the Accords established the principle that galactic civilization could include multiple systems of governance, multiple ways of organizing society, multiple definitions of what it meant to be free. The age of enforced unity was ending. The age of chosen cooperation was beginning. As news of the Accord spread across the galaxy, something remarkable happened. Species that had been silent for centuries began to speak. Colonies that had accepted their fate began to demand better treatment. Young beings who had never imagined alternatives began to dream of different futures. The Galactic Council remained, but it was no longer the only option for organizing interstellar civilization. Humanity had shown that it was possible to say no to empire and yes to cooperation, to refuse submission while offering friendship, to be strong enough to stand alone, but wise enough to work together. In the end, the galaxy learned that sometimes the most powerful negotiating position is not what you are willing to give up, but what you absolutely refuse to surrender. And humanity had never been willing to surrender the right to choose their own destiny among the stars. The age of empires was over. The age of true galactic civilization had begun. And it all started because one species simply refused to kneel.